Okay, in this video we're going to be talking about figures that are congruent. So a lot of times it's going to be two different triangles. So to make congruent figures, they have to have congruent corresponding parts. So matching sides and angles. When you name congruent polygons, you must write them in the correct order. Okay, so all of their sides need to be congruent and to each other, and all of their angles need to be congruent to each other. Okay, so in this one here, my G and C would be, my H and D would be, my E and A would be, and my F and B would be. Okay, then we also have sides that need to be congruent. So these would be congruent here, these would be congruent here, these would be, and then my last set, I'm going to do 4 dashes. Okay, the reason I do different dashes or different arcs is to tell them apart so that they all don't have one arc and then they all look like they're all congruent. Okay, and then you would say polygon CDAB is congruent to polygon. Now you have to match it GHEF. Okay, and you will see why you have to match when writing in this order. Okay, so my first one, list the pair of congruent angles. So I'm just looking at A here. It says angle C is congruent to angle F. So there's my C and F. They both have 3. And I'm going to do my doubles. So angle B is congruent to angle E. And my singles are angle A and angle D. Now I'm going to do my B picture. So it looks like I got vertical angles in here, so those are actually congruent to each other. So when I do it, it looks like angle A is congruent to angle E. They're the singles. My doubles are B and D. Okay, and then my last set is C's. Then it says congruent sides. So let's start with our single dashes. So if I start with DE, it's congruent to AB. Okay, we could have said BA or ED for these ones. It means the same line. Okay, if I start with my double, so EF is congruent to BC. And then my triple, DF is congruent to AC. All right, my next one here, if we start with our single, DE is congruent to my other single, AB. Just when you're writing the congruency statement, that's when the order matters. Okay, so CD is congruent to CB. Those are my double dashes and my triple dashes. CE is congruent to CA. Okay, now because we said all of the angles have corresponding parts that are congruent and all of the sides, now I can say, hey, these two triangles are congruent. But you have to have all of those before you can state that the triangles are congruent. So now, if I want to do A, I'm going to do it down here. We could say triangle ABC is congruent to triangle A matched with D, B matched with E, and C matched with F. The congruency statement, they have to match the angles. Okay, so my next one, I said all of the sides and angles are congruent, so I could say triangle ABC again is congruent to triangle A matches with E, B matches with D, and C matches with C. That was for my second picture. This was for my first picture. Okay, so in this one it says mark the corresponding sides and angles that are congruent. So it's actually, this is why we have to write it in order, because it's written respectively. So A is going to be congruent to F. B is going to be congruent to E. And then D is congruent to C. The sides are also written respectively. AB will be congruent to FE. BC will be congruent to DE. And then my last set. That's why we have to write them in the right order so I know what angles and sides are congruent. Okay, so that if I don't even have to look at the picture, I can just look at the congruency statement and know for my next question it says angle A is congruent to, it's going to be angle F because it's the first one. Angle D is, since it's the last one, it's going to match with angle C. Okay, my next thing is a line, so AC is going to match with FD. My next one's EF. So I went from E to F, I follow suit, so B to A. Angle B matches with angle E in there. And then DE goes D to E, C to B is the same thing. Okay, so it says BM is a perpendicular. Remember, my upside down T means perpendicular bisector. So perpendicular bisectors. It makes right angles, so that makes those two angles congruent, and it bisects the other side. Bisecting means it cuts it in half, so the left side and right side should be congruent. Okay, and the last little thing, here's my left triangle, here's my right triangle, they share that center line, so it is automatically going to be congruent. I'm going to make these double dashes so I don't get them confused with my other single dashes. Okay, and then it says BM bisects angle ABC. If it bisects that angle, it makes these two angles congruent here. Okay, so list the pair of congruent angles from the triangle. So it looks like I've got angle A and C. I've got angle 3 and 4 because they're both right angles, and I've got angle 1 and angle 2 because they're being bisected. So I've got all my angles, now I've got to check all my sides so I can say that they're congruent. So AM was congruent to MC. I've got AB, that outside piece, is congruent to BC, the other outside, and then they share that center. This is the weird one. Since they both share it, we're going to say BM, that's one of them sharing. This is the other one sharing. So BM is congruent to BM. Since I said all my sides and angles, I can go ahead and write my similar statement. The triangle, let's start with the left side. Let's say ABM. That's my left triangle. I follow suit with my other one. So I started with A. I got to start with C. The B matches with my B, and my M matches with my M. Okay, the last vocab we're learning, third angle theorem. If two angles of one triangle are congruent to two angles of another, that automatically makes the third one congruent. Because if I already have two, I subtract it from 180 to get the third. So if two of them match, that automatically means the third one match. It does not mean the triangles are congruent, because I could have different side lengths. I could have one being gigantic and one being small, but the angles being the same. Okay, so it doesn't automatically mean they're congruent, but it means the third angle is congruent. Okay, so it says, this should say the measure of angle B and the measure of angle G. Okay, represent those. Well, if I look, B and G should be congruent. If they're congruent, we can set these equal and solve. So I'm going to subtract y, divide by 2, I get y to be 25. That's why order matters when you have the congruency statement. That was supposed to say congruent in there too. Okay, my next one, solve for x and the missing angles. So I've got some vertical angles in here. Okay, so I know that this is 5x. 74 has that little congruent marking, so that's 74. So now I've got all three pieces in a triangle. So if I add them all, they should all equal 180. 5x plus 3x gets me 8x. 74 plus 2 gets me 76. We can subtract 76 and get 104. Divide by 8 and get 13. So now we just got to plug it in to find all our angles. So I got 5 times 3. 5 times 13. And then my other one is 3 times 13 plus 2. 3 times 13 plus 2 gets me 41. And then 65.